Hey everybody, this is Zach with Tanuki Games, and today we're finishing up Spooky Tanuki Games. All October, I tried to only talk about spooky games. Unfortunately, I didn't make the last week's video because life got in the way. Please remember that a like, a comment, or a subscribe means a lot to me and the channel. So, without further ado, let's take a look at Fatal Frame 2. It wouldn't feel right to leave Japanese horror games completely out this month. I remember first seeing Fatal Frame 2 and being very intrigued. At the time, I remember it feeling not so much like a traditional horror game a la Silent Hill or Resident Evil, but a found footage horror film more in the lines with The Ring or The Grudge. Even then, I knew this was a clone of those survival horror behemoths. I rented a copy of Fatal Frame 2 and had a blast. However, I never finished the game. 15 years later, I was in the local game store, and suddenly nostalgia waves came crashing down. I pulled the trigger, and there were no regrets. In most survival horror games, you're given a gun or a weapon, and you have to protect yourself with whatever you can find along the way. In Fatal Frame, you're given a camera that can damage ghosts instead. The first-person shooter-style combat is very intense, and you often have to let the ghosts get very close to you to land any significant damage. There are various lenses and film that are more effective against different enemies. The ghosts each have their own patterns and vulnerabilities. Some enemies take very strict timing to land an effective shot. There is also a combo system, all of which will turn into your points for upgrading. While Fatal Frame has made its identity from one gimmick, taking pictures of ghosts, it's a great one. It really feels horrifying to have a ghost in your face and then have to time your shot perfectly. Ammo is limited as well, with different types of film being more potent than others. When you defeat a group of enemies, it really does feel very gratifying. There are some puzzles in the game as well. They aren't that difficult. It can be a little frustrating because a lot of the puzzles are based on you backtracking the same environments pretty much over and over again. That's a pretty common thing in most survival horror games, though. Of course, since this is a pre-Resident Evil 4 survival horror game, the controls are clunky and your character is slow. However, they are not tank controls. The cumbersome movement feels appropriate. If you're given too much agency over your character, the enemies can feel unthreatening sometimes. The graphics of Fatal Frame 2 are great, if not murky. There are many filters giving the game a grainy film feel. Occasionally, you get black and white flashbacks and hallucinations. There are still dabs of color in these sequences, as well as a scratchy real filter. There are a ton of high-quality cutscenes. Each chapter will have multiple, and they all have a lot of polish. The aughts were the heyday of big cutscenes, and Fatal Frame 2 spares no expense in this department. The way the characters are blocked and how the camera is framed can be misleading and tense in cutscenes. Kudos to the folks who storyboarded and directed Fatal Frame 2. It could have been a horror movie just as easily as a game. During the cutscenes, there are lots of legitimately ominous moments where you feel that there is a real supernatural current flowing towards the characters. The flashlight is very good at presenting dynamic shadows. Additionally, backgrounds have a high level of detail. Pre-rendered backgrounds with fixed cameras really were a great presentational strategy to keep the player engaged. You never know what will be around the corner. The designs of the ghosts are very convincing, and additionally, Mayu and Mio's character designs seem to be realistic, if not in a stylized way. The only issue that Fatal Frame 2 has in the graphics department is that it is so dark. I had the settings on their lightest point, and I still could hardly tell what was going on. This may keep you from playing the game during the day or with lights on, because even the smallest glare is going to be pretty much blinding. This may have been a stroke of genius to make you play in the dark, but it really does feel just really difficult to see sometimes, especially during battles. It can actually get in your way and you don't really know what you're running into. It's a minor critique. The music in Fatal Frame is effective at getting you to feel uneasy. While there are a few tunes in the menus and such, most of it is ambient. There's always a swirling tempest of atmospheric foreboding. Additionally, the game does a good job with sound effects, and the ghosts otherworldly groans. However, some of the enemies can be difficult to place based on audio cues. There could be an enemy behind you, and when you're in the camera mode, you can't see behind you. You won't know until you get hit that they were sneaking up on you. The difficulty on normal is challenging without being too ruthless. This is helped by the weakest film having infinite ammo. If you're looking for a greater challenge, there are 2 higher difficulties as well, and there's a mission mode. Fatal Frame has 3 endings and a lot of bonuses. You get multiple costumes for different achievements, as well as a gallery and other bonuses. You will, however, have to earn them by playing the various difficulties and challenges. The storytelling in Fatal Frame 2 is expert. While there are a lot of ins and outs, it basically revolves around a small hamlet called Minakami Village. It was once the site of occult ritual sacrifices. Not to give too much away, but it involves one twin killing the other to appease an ancient evil. These sacrifices were done to prevent calamity falling on the village. Mayu and Mio, the 2 protagonists in the game, find themselves being sucked into the village of the undead and are somehow involved with the ritual, even though there appears to be no one living left. The story is enhanced by the collectibles. Each journal entry gives you a little more background on the story about the ghostly inhabitants of the village. The journals are really dark, and I enjoyed getting to read more about the history of the village. I had some reservations about reviewing Fatal Frame 2 because I like to review games that are not that expensive, and unfortunately Fatal Frame 2 is not cheap. My copy cost me $40, and I would say it's a fair price considering the replay value, but it's gonna be a little bit tough for some people to afford or to explain to themselves why they should pick up this game. Should you buy Fatal Frame? Yes, absolutely, but I can understand if it's gonna be a tough day to shell out that kind of money. In the end, Fatal Frame 2 is an interesting bit of survival horror history. Survival horror was once a profitable genre, and Fatal Frame tried to ape the best. Unintentionally or not, it changed how people perceived horror in the medium of video games. By making you literally face your fears, it showed how terrifying gaming could get. There would eventually be a release of Fatal Frame 2 on the original Xbox with extras and a remake on the Wii that was not released in the United States, but there is an English version. I hope to find copies of both eventually and review them, but for now, this will just have to be a snapshot of Fatal Frame 2. What are some other great survival horror games that I should review next? Leave a comment below. This is Zach with Tanuki Games. Any support you can give the channel, a like, a comment, or a subscribe means a lot to me and the channel.
Mayu,
Enjoy.
what's wrong? I don't want to kill anyone.